Recording.
Indeed.
So, welcome to another episode of Beta Talk. Today is my birthday, and I woke up this morning and thought, oh, I should do a podcast on my birthday. Who can I chat to? And I quickly checked my LinkedIn and I saw a post from Adam Bell. I always like reading Adam's posts. I'm not going to lie, I don't always understand him because he talks a lot about policy. He knows he's one of my experts on policy, but I always really like what he says. So we're going to chat to him today. Welcome to the show again, Adam. You've been on before, haven't you?
I have indeed, and Nathan, my birthday was yesterday, so this is very much a birthday present to me as well.
Oh, excellent. Oh, I didn't know that. So yeah, you were on last time, I think, with Madeline. So I've seen some posts around Ofgem and the CFD, contracts for difference, and then also someone posted today from the Department of Energy Security Net Zero about this new consultation about Oh, no. There's a report posted, wasn't it, that you've worked that I helped think you helped write the electricity.
Yes, that's the NIC one on distribution networks.
So we got a lot to chat about in a short amount of time because you've got to rush off. So give us a quick overview. What's been going on with Ofgem?
Well, I think fundamentally Ofgem have been disappointing me personally. I don't know whether that was intent, but they certainly have. There's two things over the last couple of days that I want to talk about. Firstly, Citizens Advice did some analysis of effectively network charges, how much and we all collectively pay the network companies over the last few years, especially during the crisis, to try to understand whether we're paying them the right amount. And what they discovered was that we'd probably overpaid the network companies to the tune of about £4 billion. Now, to you or me, that sounds like quite a lot of money, but not to Ofgem, who, in response to Citizens Advice and Work, says, "Oh, that's only a few pounds on bill. It's fine, guys. It's fine." Which doesn't really sit right with me. Now, even if it is only a few pounds on bills, which at £4 billion, I doubt, um, there are lots of people in the country for whom a few pounds has a lot of meaning, who find that it's already quite hard to heat their homes and power everything in their homes as well, and would rather not have any additional pounds driven by what was essentially a mistake by Ofgem, in the way in which they'd regulated these network companies. So that was disappointing to see. The second, and possibly, how do I put this? Certainly more narrow source of disappointment was on some work they did yesterday around standing charges. So Labour in its manifesto did include a commitment to look again at standing charges. During the crisis, people who were trying to minimise their energy demand found that standing charges made up a bigger proportion of their bill, and they're angry about that because they couldn't avoid them, which obviously I fully understand. So what Ofgem has done is said, okay, so what we want is to compel all suppliers to offer a tariff under the price cap that doesn't include a standing charge, but instead smears all the fixed costs it covers, like costs for networks, costs for gas pipes, across all the unit costs of that particular tariff. So you'll pay over the course of your entire bill rather than in a lump sum. Again, I can understand that. The problem is, though, those fixed costs for wires and for pipes, they don't change depending on the amount of energy that you use. They remain fixed. And that means if you're able to avoid some of them, then those costs have to be paid by somebody else. And that somebody else will be everyone else. So it is an excellent move for anyone who can minimize their own demand in the system. Either you've got a very efficient house, or you've chosen to reduce your demand, or you have solar panels and a battery or vehicle to grid. So it does benefit some of the least well off. I think Ofgem said of the 5 million people in the country on the lowest incomes, 4 million could benefit, 1 million will probably cost more. But for much of the rest of the country, excluding some of people like me, the ecologically minded middle classes, they will benefit more and just shove their costs elsewhere. So, two very disappointing things from Ofgem, I felt. I think there's a lot of work to be done to embed with Ofgem the idea that they have to take seriously the idea that they can't just move costs around and they can't just get away with significant £1 billion mistakes in the price control and expect not to be held to account for it.
For the lay listener and the lay person like myself, yeah, just quickly elucidate how did Ofgem come about? Yeah, what do they actually do?
I mean, that's a great question. So Ofgem was set up first as the Office of the Gas Regulator, the Office of the Electricity Regulator, privatization in the 90s. Their job was to go, okay, for all the newly privatized utilities, so at that time when the regional energy companies who owned both the networks and offered supply, they were only allowed to charge consumers a certain amount because they're essentially monopolies in the areas they covered. So what that means is they had to impose what's called a price control, which says, okay, over this period, you can charge your customers this amount in total, and you have to make sure your tariffs reflect that. Um, Again, very, very reasonable because if you do have a monopoly, they can't charge whatever they want. Otherwise, they'll just gouge people for as much money as they possibly can. The suppliers were split off from the network companies in the 2000s and were able to compete for customers. They weren't subject to price regulation anymore up until 2016 when the price cap came in, when they're once again subject to price regulation. But for our purposes today, the key is the price control that applies to the energy networks. So these are monopolies again, though there's a big argument around whether they should be, which means that in order to avoid them gouging customers via the cost they pass through suppliers, they need to ensure that they're only charging a certain amount. And that certain amounts that Ofgem specifies has to cover the costs of maintaining wires, maintaining pipes, and as well as building out new infrastructure. Now, the problem is that in order to figure out how much is appropriate to charge people for these services, you need to have lots of information about the networks. And the people who have lots of information about the networks are the networks, not Ofgem. And so every price control cycle, which is normally about every 5 years, though it randomly fluctuates depending on Ofgem's feeling in any given cycle, Ofgem asks all of the network companies to put their business plans to them, which will have a kind of a headline number for the amount that they want to charge. And Ofgem will go through the red with a red pen, go, oh no, you can't have that, you can't have that. Oh, we think you're charging too much there. And so Ofgem comes out with a price control at the end that says this is the amount you're allowed to charge. Network companies always complain. Occasionally they'll go to the CMA to appeal the amount, and then they'll get on with the business of delivering the price control. Consistently, because what the Citizens Advice has found this time around is nothing new, network companies somehow manage to make more money than Ofgem expects. And this is just a consistent feature of price regulation because of that information problem I talked about, the information asymmetry problem, which Ofgem has never been fully able to solve. And Ofgem effectively responding to Citizens Advice saying, you've once again failed to effectively regulate the networks by saying, nah, it's fine. So it's all right, lads, it's fine. Don't worry, nothing to say here. Just is not good enough.
Hmm. Now, this report that's just come out, then this electricity distribution networks creating capacity for the future. You mentioned something about recommendation 13. I think on one of your posts.
Oh
What
yes, I mean that is brutally in the weeds though. So I'll provide an overview of the report as well. Recommendation 13 I liked because it was saying actually, do you know what, you need to make specific changes to regulations to make this work, including allowing people to build bigger substations, which obviously you'll need as the more power flows to the network in order to install heat pumps and EVs and whatnot. So the NIC had looking at distribution networks. So for those of your listeners who want to understand what that is, essentially those are the low voltage networks. So they cover anything from about 133 kilovolts down, so all the way down through different voltage step down stations into your home. So they're essentially the bit of the network that serves you most directly. But obviously, if we are going to deploy heat pumps everywhere, if everyone's going to get an EV, we need to ensure that there's enough capacity in the wires to get power to people. Right now, there bluntly is not. Most networks are designed on the assumption that what's called the after diversity maximum demand, so basically the amount of wire they have to build, is something like, say, 1.5 kilowatts per house. They assume that's the kind of the maximum demand from any given house, averaged over in that area, about say three to 400 houses. Obviously, many of your listeners are installing heat pumps and will know if everyone's running their heat pump in the winter, that number is going to be a lot bigger. And so, therefore, you need to have fatter wires and more transformers and bigger ones at that. What the NIC has done is said, okay, if we are going to decarbonize the economy by electrifying, what do we need to do to distribution networks as part of that? And what we need to do is, first of all, as I said, change regulations to make it easier to expand, but also, this goes back to Ofgem, ensure that Ofgem is delivering a price control which is appropriate for the scale of investment to hand. And so in the work, the NIC recommends that Ofgem Well, essentially recommends Ofgem try to get the price control right, which is obviously nice. I agree they should try to get the price control right. But also seeks to minimize, enables network companies to invest ahead of need. So touch the network once is the line. And that means when they're upgrading a network, they should upgrade in such a way as to ensure that anyone under that particular substation can get a heat pump and an EV, and you'll never need to touch that network again. And while they're doing it, they need to get on with it with no regret stuff like local loop and bundling, which I'm sure many of your listeners will be familiar with. But it's when two households find themselves in the same electrical loop coming off the main spur, which tends to reduce their fuse size to about maybe 30 to 40 amps. Um, so it's an important report because I think it gives you a sense of the scale of investment that distribution networks need. The numbers they have to assume that they increase spending on new infrastructure by about £2 billion over the next up until 2050 on average per year. So that's a lot of cash. That's a lot of wires. That's a lot of transformers, and it is a big change to the system. But this is the sort of work that we need to get done now and that we need to kick off quite promptly.
And you're also kind of well known for sort of talking about the pylons and that we need more pylons in. And I've actually got a question there. So I've got a friend who arguably is one of these people that doesn't like pylons going everywhere, and he says we should be running wires around coast or around the coast to get it from where the electricity is being generated to where we need it. I mean, so what would you say to someone like that? I mean, who's a bit of opposed to these pylons going on land? Can we
So
run
the
them
answer
around
is
the coast?
The answer is that we are, and we already do.
Yeah.
The West Coast bootstrap, which is a large high voltage direct current cable that takes power from northern Scotland down into the northwest, is already developed. And in National Grid's plan for building out transmission capacity, the overwhelming majority of cable is going to go offshore. So I
Right.
think there's about, I don't think this is exactly right, but it's the ballpark. There's about 2,000 kilometers of cable going offshore and about 600 kilometers worth of cable going on land. Now, the reason why it can't all go offshore is because, well, because of physics. You can build cables with big HV. The cables that you install offshore are direct current cables, and our power system runs on alternating current. To convert that direct current back to alternating current, you need quite a large substation at either end of the cable to enable power electronics and various other bits and pieces to do that conversion. What that means is, unlike with a standard kind of AC pylon, you can't just then attach a new wire to it halfway through, especially if it's under the sea. You would need to build an entirely new branch and an entirely new substation to achieve that. If you run pylons over land, especially in areas where you expect there to be more demand that you would need to service, that gives you the option in the future of connecting to that pylon rather than having to build a whole new cable and a whole new substation. There's also a reason for system security why you want both. And quite apart from Russian subs coming and cutting undersea cables, you also want to ensure that if there's a fault in one circuit, you have at least another circuit open to receive the power and allow the power to keep flowing. So I understand why people might not want to see them, but there are good reasons, both for economic and practical and technical reasons, to have both offshore cables and onshore pylons.
And as we've spoke about in the past, the pylons sort of make a little bit more sense than sort of digging up loads of ground and laying them underground. And
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, quite frankly, if you think that a pylon is worse for the environment than digging effectively something the width of two football pitches either side of the cable and laying multiple trenches to deliver the same volume of power, then quite frankly, I have a hedgerow that's about to be digging up that I'd like to talk to you. It doesn't necessarily make sense. It's more expensive. It's better and it's worse for the environment. The only upside of the has is you don't have to look at them. Well, you have to look at the big swathe of earth you just cut out of the ground, but not forever, I guess.
yeah, it's always interesting why sort of people don't like the look of them, but I suppose everyone's, we all this, this aesthetics, everything sort of pleases us in different ways, doesn't it, to the eye? And then, so we've also had, I think today, wasn't it, the Energy Department sort of announced that they've got this consultation about the what people call CFD, contracts for difference, which is a topic I know zilch about. You would obviously know. I mean, and so what? Just explain for the listeners what's going on there, then.
So contract for difference are how we support most renewables in the UK. So basically what they are is a contract that says whenever you sell your power, wind farm or solar farm, you'll get a fixed price. And we allocate that fixed price via an auction, which is a very efficient way of setting prices, ensures competition has helped drive down costs. Today's announcement is quite a significant, kind of subtle change to the auction. So previously, what happened was the Secretary of State, so who's currently Ed Miliband, would say, "Okay, I'm going to spend this amount of money through the CFD auction to effectively buy these sorts of wind farms." And therefore, if you in the way in which the auction works is you come in and say, "Okay, I've got a wind farm of X size, expect to produce Y power, and the bid on that X price." And you say, and you'll go in, you'll compare your kind of bid price, what's called your strike price, against the amount you expect it to cost. So taking away your expected wholesale price from the bid price and multiplying it by volume to give you a final number. And then you take that number away from the budget. And once you've run out of budget, the auction closes and everyone gets their CFD if they've won. What's changed today is that Ed Miliband said, "Do you know what, actually, I'm not completely sure I trust the market not to deliver me a too small amount of wind. So what I'm going to do instead is once everyone's put their bids in, I'm have a look. I'm have a look at it to see what everyone's bids and the amount of volume are, and therefore what any given budget would buy. And I'm going to set my budget after the auction is closed." Now, the challenge is this means if you're bidding in, you're no longer really bidding in just against other people who are building wind farms. You're now bidding in against what you think Ed Miliband wants. And that is a very, very different thing to calculate. It means that you have to all of a sudden figure out what the psychology of the Secretary of State is likely to be at any given point. So it's significant change to the dynamic of the auction. And alongside all the kind of stuff around locational pricing is going to make the next allocation round 7, very spicy.
Oh, I love that. I'm just checking with time because you've got to rush off at some point. Is it 2 minutes or 5 minutes? When have you got to go?
I've got 5 minutes, it's fine.
You've got 5 minutes.
This is not too fun.
No, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, I don't really know too much about the that kind of world. I mean, like I say, I love reading your posts, and also is it Kate Mulvaney? I think she's a consultant at Cornwall Insight. Always sort of, I like what she writes as well. I think she reposts some of your stuff. She replied to something I wrote.
Oh yeah.
I'll have to get her on the show actually. She replied to something I wrote the other day, and put it in such an eloquent way. Because I've been getting myself into trouble a little bit. I've been pushing back against some people on LinkedIn posts. I think I've caused a few crisis meetings at Energy Systems Catapult and Era and Hive. um, talking about heat? I mean, obviously you've talked about heat pumps sometimes. In that, which is the industry I tend to talk about the most. What are you seeing within that sector? So I'll quickly tell you that some of the engineers and people I talk to, we started this year off really, really positive, and something sort of seems to have changed. We're not as optimistic as we used to be. We don't know why, but it just doesn't feel. There's something in the air that just doesn't feel right. I mean, what are you seeing around the sort of sector that I'm in? This heat pump sort of world.
So I think the sector's facing a number of challenges right now. Firstly, that there's a significant amount of uncertainty, and it's in the form of the spending review. Now, right now, the clean heat market mechanism has a buyer price of £500, and the boiler upgrade scheme has a grant of seven and a half grand. And combined, those will be enough to help drive forward support for a significant number of heat pumps. The problem is the BUS is not going to last forever. Rachel Reeves has no more money, and delivering it at that scale up until 2028, with the numbers that government wants to deliver, about 600,000 per year, would be incredibly expensive. And we just don't have the cash. And the government has shown no appetite whatsoever to put a really harsh buyout price in the clean heat market mechanism, which would essentially be a backstop for that, because that would spread costs around everyone else buying heating appliances. So I think that uncertainty around the future is unhelpful. At the same time now, I think a lot of the stuff that's coming out of MCS has been deeply unhelpful too. There's a real sense, especially from the Catapult report, which I think you referred to earlier on, that MCS is just not good enough. And the MCS is responding to being not good enough by doing a bunch of mad nonsense, like saying, "Oh, every heat pump is not the same. How dare you try to buy more efficient devices? How dare you try to be more efficient in your installation practices? We're going to assume, for the purposes of the data you provide customers, that you're all useless, and all heat pumps are useless." And that I can't help but think is probably incredibly negative for the sector. I think there's a strong argument that the role of MCS is unhelpful. And there's a stronger argument, and this is probably quite controversial, that monitoring should play a far bigger role than input regulation.
Well, they did have a meeting in London this week about that monitoring, and I was supposed to go down to MCS for that, and a few people went to it. There's some people from the energy department went, and my friend Tristan went, who I've had on the podcast, who's been doing a lot of work around monitoring. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it in the end because it's half term, and my daughter needed me that particular day, and she comes first. As much as I love heat pumps, she comes first. So I couldn't make that. So I don't know. I'll be getting the brief from what happened at that meeting. So hopefully they will do. I mean, MCS, yeah, they do need to do some changes. I mean, they have been copping it a lot recently because I mean a lot of the poor installs out there, everyone sort of blames MCS, but I'm saying, well, look, there is a couple of entities prior to MCS. So there's the whole training industry, and then you've got this whole industry of awarding body certification. They give them the certificates, they're making a lot of money out of that, and then you've got this training industry making a huge amount of money out of the voucher scheme. And I've called into question. You've got the people running that, which I think is the Midlands Net Zero Hub and the Nottingham Council, and they're saying it's a success, and I'm saying it's not. We've paid for 14,000 people to get trained. You're saying 80% of them said it was really valuable, but what you didn't tell people was only 2.6% of people answered your survey. So that's 80% of 2.6. It's not a success, and a lot of the people I chat to do not feel confident or competent in installing a heat pump, and we've paid about £2.6 million, us taxpayers, to do that. So that training industry is making a lot of money out of us taxpayers for these 3-day courses that just aren't working. But government are listening to me about that, and I've got to go and talk to some of the good civil servants I know about that. Right, so Adam, fantastic chatting to you.
Good, should you as well, Nathan?
Yeah, I like I say, I always if you don't know Adam Bell, you do a blog, don't you? You have a blog site. Have I got that right?
I do, yes, yes. The unbalancing mechanism.
The unbalancing mechanism. So look that up if you want to read more of Adam's stuff, which is quite good. Adam, you go off, and if you are still celebrating your birthday from yesterday, have a good one. I'm going to start celebrating mine now.
Excellent. In that case, Nathan, it only remains to wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Take care, buddy.
Bye-bye.